So welcome to the webinar this morning. I'll be taking you through the morning with some insights and input from my colleague Rebecca, digital strategist at MOBILISATION, and Rhiannan Sullivan from Care2, who will be talking about how Care2 clients are recruiting new supporters and fundraising in this new environment. So here we're going to test the technology again, and I'm going to try launching a poll. So what we wanted to do was find out a little bit about you and what your situation is at the moment. So I'm hoping that everybody will be able to see this. If you can't, please bear with us, because it sounds like some people are able to see slightly different things to others. So I'm going to launch a poll, which should hopefully pop up on your screen at the moment, and just ask you to answer the question. So the question is, thinking about your fundraising, how is your organisation adapting to the crisis at the moment? So which of these situations best represents your situation? I'm seeing answers coming in, so that's good news. So are you still getting to grips with the implications? Are you getting there? Plans starting to come together? Have you redeveloped forward plans for the next few months and those are already rolling out? Or is your situation none of these? Is something different? I'll just give everyone a minute or two to respond. Okay, still answers coming in. Okay, seems to have settled down. So what we've got here, so if I close the poll, hopefully you should be able to see the responses. Okay, so a majority in the middle, basically. So just over half of you are getting there. So plans are starting to come together about how you can adapt to a fundraising situation in the crisis. A few people still working out how to respond. I imagine a lot of people have furloughed key staff, and therefore it's really difficult to work out next steps. And then a good third who have already redeveloped plans for the next few months. So that's really great news. So thanks for that. That gives us a bit of context for our next section. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rebecca, who will be sharing some insights and explanations of what's happening next. I just need to work out how to hide the poll. There we go, and I will hand over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Jess. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
only you can answer that, Jess, but there we go. Thank you very much. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca, a strategist at MOBILISATION, and this morning I'm going to be sharing my top 5 tips for developing a successful supporter recruitment strategy. But before I get started, I just wanted to give a quick introduction to MOBILISATION to those of you who haven't heard of us before. So we're a digital mobilisation agency that works exclusively with progressive charities and not-for-profits. We specialise in supporting organisations to deliver high-impact communications campaigns and fundraising. And we do this in 3 ways, so providing strategy consultancy, support with creative design, and developing technology and software. So we do everything from full service campaign delivery right through to just separate parts of that. Whatever you basically need support with, we can help with. We also have our own campaigning and fundraising platform, which you might have heard of, CAMPAIGNION. And this enables you to quickly and easily set up optimised campaign actions and donation forms. Right, so enough about, who we work with. That's an important one. Here are just a few of some of the organisations we work with. So you can see there's a real mix in there from very small organisations, just a couple of people, right through to very, very large ones. So we've got lots of experience. So yeah, enough about us. Today I want to share my top 5 tips with you, like I said. I know that maybe lead generation and supporter recruitment is potentially a priority for you right now. Lots of organisations are launching urgent appeals and campaigns in response to the coronavirus. These tips are going to be framed in a fundraising context, but can be applied to any recruitment strategy you might be developing, whatever kind of new supporters you're looking to recruit, and whether that's related to the coronavirus pandemic or not. So let's get started. So tip number 1, be really clear about why you are recruiting new supporters. So too often I think supporter recruitment projects start with a number rather than a strategy. So you might be like, well, we just need 100 new regular givers, or we need 10,000 supporters on our email list. So there can be a tendency to jump straight in without taking a step back and thinking about why you're actually recruiting. So it's really important to consider your recruitment in the context of your supporter strategy. So think really carefully about what's your objective. Probably good to start, go back to your organisational strategy if you're struggling to identify what that is. And then once you know why, you can really focus on who you need to be recruiting. And you can think about what exactly do you want your supporters to do and how are you going to measure this? So that means you think carefully about what success looks like and what metrics you're going to use to measure that. And once you've got an idea of that, you can then move on to actually thinking about, okay, who are the audience that we want to recruit as new supporters? You can draw up personas and think about how you're going to reach them. At this point, it's really a good idea to evaluate your past activity, think about what insights you have from past recruitment you might have done. And if you haven't done any recruitment before, you don't have any of those insights to work off, then a good place to start is just with a hypothesis for you to test out. Okay, so you've had to think about your strategy, your objectives, your metrics, and your audience. Tip 2 is to choose your recruitment actions carefully. So when deciding what recruitment tactics you're going to use, it can be tempting just to copy what everyone else is doing. But try to resist that temptation. It's really important to think about your strategy and weigh up your options and decide what actually is going to work best for you. You'll see I've put actions in plural there because it's probably quite likely that you'll need to test a variety of actions in order to work out what is going to be the best tactic for your organisation. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the most common types of recruitment actions and tactics and assess some of their potential strengths and challenges, things you might want to consider before choosing them. So first up, a subscribe or a sign up action. So the strengths of this is that it's always on. You often have a sign up form on your website or maybe pinned on your Facebook page, and they're really easy to do. You know, a supporter just needs to enter their name and email and then they're subscribed to your list. They don't even have to consider an opt-in question. The challenges with that though is that they're often not particularly compelling, so it can be hard to get people to do them, and they don't tend to be very shareable. Not many people tend to share sign up forms with their friends and family. And then donate or fundraise actions. So they can work really well for recruitment if you've got an urgent appeal, because they can get really high traffic. And another strength is the cost of the recruitment is offset instantly if they're making a donation as the way that you're recruiting them. But the challenges with them is opt-ins can be quite low on donation forms, and the volume of people going to that page can often be quite low as well if it's not an urgent action. And it's also quite a high bar ask. So to make a donation, it's quite a big thing to ask a supporter to do as their first way of supporting you. So that can be quite challenging to get people to do that. And then campaign actions. So strengths of these are they can be really compelling if they're really timely and well framed. So you can get lots of people to do them in quite a short space of time. They tend to have quite a high conversion rate, again, if they're executed well. And they can be really shareable, which means you can reach new audiences and have quite a low cost per lead, potentially. But the challenges with these are they're particularly time bound. So most campaigns aren't, they're not always on, don't always have campaign actions live. And also the fact that not every organisation does campaigning, so it might not even be an option for you if that's not something your organisation does. And then finally, engagement actions. So the strengths of these, by an engagement action, I mean things that aren't necessarily related to campaigning or fundraising that you ask your supporters to do, so things like polls and quizzes. So the strengths of these are that you can reach new audiences, so potentially those that might not want to donate or do a campaign action for you in the first instance. And they can be really shareable if they're optimized, which again means you can reach new audiences and potentially have a low cost per lead. But the challenges with these is they are difficult to execute well, and they can sometimes have low opt-in rates. So this is just listing sort of examples of things to weigh up when you're choosing what you might use as part of your recruitment strategy. So think about how you can strengthen the action that you're going to choose and how you might mitigate the challenges. So for example, is there a way you can make your sign-up ask more compelling? Maybe by framing it as in using campaigning language, for example, or could you increase the opt-in for a donate or an engagement ask by maybe adding some kind of value exchange, e.g. donate or sign up and you can get a tote bag or a printed guide. And the thing to keep in mind is that every action is going to have challenges, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't go ahead and use it, even if those challenges are quite hard to mitigate. It just means you need to adjust your expectations and your expected results. So a donate ask just might take more time to recruit the number of people you're looking for, or an engagement action might just mean you have a higher cost per lead because the opt-in rates are low. And that's okay if it's meeting your objectives and recruiting the right supporters for you. You just need to think it through and sense check against your strategy. Okay, cost per lead is one of the big metrics in any supporter recruitment strategy. So that's the amount it costs to recruit each new supporter. So I just thought it'd be a good idea to take a quick look at the top 3 things that tend to impact it. So things you should consider when developing your plans. So first up is the shareability of your action. So this is one thing that can really dramatically reduce your cost per lead. Supporters can effectively have no cost. They can be free if you just have a campaign action that lots of people are sharing, and that means you're recruiting new supporters. But if you are investing in Facebook advertising, for example, I've seen evidence that if the advert is really shareable, then that can bring down the cost per lead of using those Facebook adverts. So yeah, something to really consider, especially if you haven't got a lot of money to invest. And then conversion rate. So this is the percentage of people landing on your action and taking it and opting in. So you want to be aiming for at least 60% of people opting in. If this is low, then it can substantially increase your cost per lead. If you've got a lot of new supporters coming to your page, but they're either not taking the action or they're not opting in, that's money down the drain. So you really want to look to optimize that. So consider the channel that you're promoting to and the audience if you're not getting the rate that you think you should be and your page is already optimized, then you might want to work back and look at the channel, or is it the audience? Something's going wrong in that strategy. And finally, targeting. So if your cost per lead isn't what you're expecting, have you got your targeting right? Are you going after the right audience? It could be that your hypothesis is wrong, and actually the audience you thought were going to respond really well to this aren't. But one thing to keep in mind when you're considering and evaluating your cost per lead, particularly when you're thinking about targeting and what success looks like, is it's important to remember that success doesn't necessarily mean cheap. The aim shouldn't necessarily be to get the lowest cost per lead possible. Actually, is that what success looks like for you? It's important to remember if you're going after hard to reach audiences that might actually be more expensive. Cheaper is not always better. So your Facebook adverts might cost you 11 pence per lead, but this won't be a good investment if none of those people open the emails you send them and they don't do what you want them to do, for example, convert to new donors. So always remember that the cost per lead is relative to the quality of supporter you recruit, not the quantity. Okay, tip 3, get prepared. So before you start your recruitment activities, it's vital you get some strong digital mobilisation foundations in place. So by this, I mean things like optimising your opt-in experience. So this is one of the benefits of working with Care2 if you're recruiting new supporters. They run the action for you and they've worked really hard on optimising it. So they've done all the hard work for you. But if you're using your own actions on your own landing pages, then you need to work hard to make sure that you've got that optimised so you can get the best conversion rate. Sort out your data processes so you can track where supporters come from. You can't evaluate your recruitment strategy unless you can track exactly where new supporters are coming from. And if you can't do this, you could just be throwing money down the drain because you just don't know how successful you're being. And then finally, really important, have a supporter welcome journey designed and ready to go. So you really want to be welcoming new supporters, ideally within 24 hours of them joining. And remember that recruiting that supporter is just the start. Often the journey is where you will look to achieve your objectives, for example, converting them into donors or having them become campaigners. And this really needs to be well designed to do this. If you're not sure where to start with any of that, then we have lots of free reports available on our website to support you with that, optimising web forms, optimising email opt-ins and designing great supporter journeys. Okay, tip 4 is test your channels. So you've got your foundations in place, your actions are ready to go. And again, it can be tempting just to jump to use the channels that everyone else is using. But like your actions, you need to test which ones work for you. So when considering which channels to use, just make sure you go back to your audience. Think about where are they and what channels are they going to be using? How can you best reach them? So for example, it probably is pointless using Facebook adverts if you're looking to recruit people in their 20s who don't tend to use that platform too much. I just want to quickly look at some of the most popular channels organisations are using, keeping in mind that you're probably going to need to test what works for you. So I recently did some research for Shelter on movement building, where I interviewed 7 organisations, and I asked them what the leading source of supporter growth was for them. And most of them said that it was supporters sharing their campaign actions on email and social media. So again, shareability and sharing a really important thing to think about when you're designing your actions and optimising them, particularly if your budget is small or you don't have too much. That's one where you can really focus on to get organic growth. Facebook adverts are another popular one. My tip here with these is you really need to test. You need to invest time and energy to really optimize your Facebook adverts to get the best results and target really carefully. And then finally, Care2. So this is a really reliable way to get new leads. As I said before, they do the hard work for you with their tested and optimized actions on their platform. And it's great if you're short on capacity and time, because it doesn't require lots of hands-on management like other channels do. Care2 deliver the leads to you, and then you can put them into your supporter space and you're ready to go running a supporter journey with them. The important thing to remember is don't put all your eggs in one basket with channels. Make sure you test different ones to see which one works for you. And remember that channels that might not have worked in the past might work for different actions and for different audiences. You really need to really consider what your objectives are when choosing them. Okay, and final tip is measure success meaningfully. So again, you really need to focus on what success looks like for your supporter recruitment strategy and how you're going to measure that. Now, I think short-term metrics for things like conversion rates, cost per lead, opt-in rates, that's how you know your tactics and channels are working for recruitment. And I think generally we're pretty good at tracking those and focusing on those. But I think what's often overlooked is long-term metrics. And this is how you know your strategy as a whole is really working, a really important thing to focus on. So these need to be defined by your strategy, but here are some examples of what you might potentially use. And this highlights why good tracking is so important as part of supporter recruitment. So for example, an engagement rate, so that's depends on how you define it, but it could be the percentage of new supporters who have gone on to take another action. Or you could maybe have a donor conversion rate or an average donation amount. If you compare those by channel and action, that's a really good way of evaluating which one might be strongest for you. And unsubscribe rates over time is a really good one to focus on too. So which channel or action is seeing high levels of attrition, and should you continue to invest in this? But you need to remember you need to balance this against other metrics. So for example, a channel might be seeing high levels of unsubscribe rates, but you could have a really high average donation amount for people you're converting to donors on that. So actually on balance, that might be a stronger channel. So you really need to look at things holistically with these metrics to improve your strategy. Remember that your strategy should always be a work in progress, where you're looking at these and you're testing and you're improving. Okay, I want to really quickly look at a quick case study from Liberty to end my presentation. So Liberty shared this at the ECF conference, Europe conference in 2019, November 2019, and this is a conference that More Onion organises. So Liberty, the objective of their recruitment strategy was to recruit new supporters and convert them into Liberty members, so effectively regular givers. So the metric they were looking at was donor conversion. And the tactic they chose was to offer a free copy of their guide to the Human Rights Act. So the action was that you could order a printed guide to be delivered to you. And the channel they chose to invest in, amongst others, was Facebook adverts. And they targeted a lookalike audience. So this was they used their current supporters and said to Facebook, please can you find people who are like them? So people that were already members saying, can you find people who are like these? A really great targeting tactic on Facebook. And they tested 20 different versions of their adverts. They did a lot of testing to find out what was going to work best. And to achieve their objective, they developed a supporter welcome journey focused on donor conversion. So it included soft donation asks on the thank you pages of the engagement asks that they included in that journey. So that was a survey and a campaign action. And they had 6 emails over 3 weeks introducing Liberty's campaigns and then having a membership invitation in there as well. And they achieved some really impressive results. So nearly 4,000 supporters recruited, and they got nearly a 2.5% conversion rate of people to members, to donors from that. So 98 members were recruited. And they've repeated this with different rollouts and are still seeing really good results in recruiting new members. And their insights were, so that supporter journey is really important. So starting with light touch engagement actions to drive donor conversion later in the journey. And they had a supporter journey that tells a story. It was really engaging. They daisy chained donation asks other actions. So that's having that donation ask on a thank you page of an engagement action. So gently introducing the idea of donating as a way to support Liberty. And they did a lot of testing and optimization of those Facebook ads as well. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm going to take questions at the end, I think. So now I'm going to hand back to Jess.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. So yes, we'll take questions for both Rhiannon and Rebecca at the end. So please kind of either post those in the questions panel, which it seems like more people can see than the chat panel, and I will manage those, or at the end we'll have a mechanism for hopefully those who can raise their hands to do so. So please do make a note of your questions and we'll handle those at the end. So before I hand over to Rhiannon, we had another poll question for you to kind of explore your current situations in a bit more detail. So I'm just going to try and launch that second poll. So this is about kind of how your organisation's cause is able to relate to the crisis and how you're able to talk about your cause in this context when really everything has to be related to the current crisis. You really can't talk about things without taking note of the context. So and obviously you might find this feels like it doesn't apply, but feel free to choose the option that feels most relevant. So obviously everybody's cause is affected by the crisis, our fundraising and our work, but how directly you can relate your issue to the crisis will vary. And that's one of the things that Rhiannon will be talking about, is how different organisations are handling that very difficult situation where it's quite hard to ask people for support around issues which can't be connected. So lots of answers coming in. I'm just going to hold a few moments to let people answer. So how does your organisation's cause relate to the crisis? Some or all of your work is directly in response to it. Your cause is directly affected by it. Your cause is not directly connected, but you can make the links. Or it's really hard to talk about our issue in this context. Few more answers trickling in. Just give you a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and share the responses. Okay, so this is really interesting that, when we were talking to people in the immediate weeks as kind of furlough was starting and lockdown began, a lot of people were talking about how very difficult it was to talk about your issue in this context. And actually, literally nobody has said that this time, which is really interesting, that I think people are working out the ways in which every issue can be talked about in this context. So that's actually really encouraging. And then kind of a, not even, but a spread there of organisations where you have coronavirus response work to talk about, a direct connection, but lots of people working out, our cause is not connected, but we're working out how to make those links. So Rhiannon will be looking at a few more examples of how organisations are doing that. Now, what we were going to do next was actually offer you the chance to kind of share a little bit more information about this, but it looks like not enough people have got access to the chat to make that work. So we're going to move on, and hopefully we can dedicate the time to a little bit more discussion and exchange. So I've got some really great questions coming in the Q&A, so do feel free to post your questions in there as Rhiannon is talking, and we can handle those at the end. So I'm just going to hide the poll, and I need to just give us a moment while we hand over presenter rights to Rhiannon. Okay, so now we can see Rhiannon's slides. So Rhiannon is VP of Strategy and Partnerships Europe for Care2, and she'll be talking us through some news and features of Care2's platform, and also how some of their clients are using or are reacting to the coronavirus crisis to change the way that they're recruiting new supporters. So over to you, Rhiannon.
Great, thanks Jess, and great to be here. So I'll briefly introduce Care2 for those of you that don't already know. We're an online social action network. We have over 50 million individuals globally that are part of the network, and these people are taking action. Care2's roots very much started in advocacy, so anyone can start a petition on Care2. But the main way that we work with charities, and what I'm going to be talking about today, is that we are an acquisition source for charities, and charities want to directly connect to our audience so they can grow their list and grow their supporter base and build their donor prospect base up. So I'm going to be talking about that in this presentation. Just to give you a bit of a quick snapshot about who Care2 members are, as you can see there, sort of average age of a Care2 member is sort of 39 to 45, almost 80% are female, 56% give to charities seen on Care2, so on and so forth. A quick note about this slide, just to say that this is information that we've got from directly surveying our audience. So these should be taken as an average, and we don't sort of hold any sort of appended data on these people. So this is people that we've directly surveyed. And then I wanted, before we kind of get into it and really kind of start talking about the acquisition product, I just wanted to share this in the kind of current landscape that we're in. This is sort of information that we've crowdsourced at Care2, but I thought it was just interesting to see that the latest report, more people, 70% of more people surveyed globally are spending more time on their smartphone, so no kind of surprises there, climbing above 80% for Gen Z and millennials. Now, obviously, the Care2 audience, what I'm going to be talking about, is an older audience than that, but I still think it's kind of important for you guys to kind of be thinking about these kind of stats while you're sort of developing your fundraising strategies in this kind of COVID-19 context. 44% watching more video content, so thinking about how you can use video when we kind of get into the kind of what tactics you might be using. So that might be something to be thinking about. And then I just wanted to share this last stat here because it's very relevant for us in the non-profit world. And what you can see there, 44% of young consumers would appreciate brands providing support for mental health. So I just thought that was an interesting stat to share, because there's a lot of leaders in that field, either on this call, but obviously in our industry. So I think these are just kind of interesting tidbits just to be kind of thinking about as we go on. But like I said, the Care2 audience specifically is actually slightly older, like I said, 39 to 45, but worth thinking in a more broader context as well. And then just to share with you very briefly what Care2 is doing around, what our voice is around COVID-19. We have an activist university. Can everyone hear me okay? Just checking. Jess, can you hear me?
Yep, audio is great.
Okay, great. So this is on our activist hub here. So this is hashtag Care2 COVID-19, where we were pulling all of our petitions together, aggregating them if that's authored by charities, by citizens, and by Care2 ourselves. So we have been developing our own hub, and that's been online for the past month. So just to kind of share that with you there. So kind of moving on to the kind of acquisition side of things, and as we said, we're all here today. Care2 is a lead generation source and acquisition hub for charities, and we work with over 3,000 charities across the globe. I'm going to talk you through sort of briefly the model and the flow and how it works. I actually wanted to start though with this petition, because this one was one of the first ones that we got up and running. This is actually based in the US, not in the UK or Europe. And of course, it's there's a very, very strong fit in terms of the messaging. So protecting nurses during COVID-19. This petition is already kind of over 100,000, I think. The purpose of this petition for them, though, wasn't fundraising, just to be very clear. We got this petition up and running. They're obviously generating leads off the back of it. But for them, it was to actually kind of get letters sent directly to Congress. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. But really, a lot of what the examples I want to show you today are those charities that are not directly sitting in the healthcare space. And as Jess just kind of referred to there, like where we can show other links and what people are doing. But this is just one example of one of the first ones we got up and running. So this organisation is one of our sort of larger clients in the UK, Fauna and Flora International. They've been running supporter lead generation campaigns with us since 2016 actually, but this is the most recent one, and I think this is really interesting because you can see here this is their action on the left in December, pledge to save pangolins, but they actually pivoted as early as February to tweak their messaging to be COVID-19 related, which was one of the earliest that we'd seen. I'm actually going to come back to these guys because this is going to be the case study in the supporter journey that I'm going to talk you through shortly, because they've been sort of kind enough to share their results, but I'm going to continue showing the actual flow of the opt-in for now. But this is an interesting, I think this is an interesting example of how an organisation has shifted very early their messaging. This slide here is to show you the actual lead generation bit. Now, Rebecca was talking earlier about the kind of the opt-in. This is Care2's opt-in here. So in the background, you can see the petition, and this is the opt-in that we serve. You're all actually getting sort of a pretty almost exclusive look at this opt-in as it's brand new. We've just released this week. So we actually used to work on a radio button format, and we've just done through rigorous testing, we've now kind of changed this button format, as you can see here. But we make it very clear, obviously, that this opt-in is fully GDPR compliant, and this is how the opt-in looks in all GDPR countries. So that's the kind of the data capture bit and the opt-in there. So that's where someone on Care2 has to opt in. And I should add at this point, just to make it clear, as Rebecca was talking earlier about the different kind of types of lead models, Care2's model is a fixed cost per lead, and we sort of do all the work for you. So we run the petition, we'll promote it to our audience, to our list, serve this opt-in, and then deliver you the data after sending a welcome email as well. Just to kind of make it clear that the model is slightly different from other channels out there that aren't fixed cost per leads. So anyway, moving on, that's the opt-in there. So I wanted to show another example of another live client with ours at the moment, which is Amnesty International UK. And this is the Free Nazarene campaign, which many of you I'm sure will have seen. But you can see it's quickly there between March and April how they've pivoted their messaging, which is now obviously kind of focusing on COVID-19 sweeping through Iranian prisons. So that's very, very quick pivoting there. But again, a very solid and very clear and very relevant link for them as well. So it's just really interesting seeing that poll actually like earlier on about where a lot of charities can draw their links. And this is an example from Liberty, which you've just seen from Rebecca talking about. So they've also started using Care2 as another channel. So they're kind of diversifying their recruitment. So they're continuing to do that great work on Facebook, and they're actually about to go live with Care2, which is why it's not actually live, or it just went live, I think, this morning. So they're using Care2 as an acquisition platform as well as Facebook. But the reason I wanted to show this to you was for two reasons. Well, the first reason to show how they have adapted their messaging to COVID-19, again, which is like a very, very strong and relevant link, but also a bit of a tactic to share with you that what they're doing on their site, the right hand, that's their petition on their site. So really a lot of you'd be using Care2 to recruit new supporters. So it's quite common for a lot of organizations to just mirror the petition or the campaign that you might be running on your own site and run it with us. So just trying to kind of put that in context of reducing workload for clients. If you're running a petition, just mirror it and run it on our site, because you'd be working with Care2 to recruit new supporters. So that's just another tactic that people often do. And the final sort of route to acquisition that I just want to kind of focus on before we get into some kind of data and results is sort of Care2 signups. And this is where you'll see the opt-in there, where we serve this opt-in not only just after a client's branded petition, but this is live right now, WWF UK are a live client. We will also serve your opt-in after sort of thematically related citizen authored petitions or Care2 branded petitions. And really, the reason I'm sort of pulling this out is to just illustrate that you don't necessarily need, if you're not a campaigning organisation per se, then you can still run a campaign, because we can serve your opt-in after thematically related petitions, or if you don't have a petition that you want to run straight away. So that can sometimes be a barrier for people. But the main thing is, you know, you're getting your opt-in in front of highly engaged socially conscious people that are on Care2 and taking action. So that's the kind of, this is the most popular and main route to acquisition with Care2, particularly if you're using Care2 to generate not only supporters but donor prospects as well for your sort of for your acquisition program. So that's the kind of the route to acquisition there. There's I'm sure I'm happy to take more questions on that, but I wanted to kind of go back to Fauna and Flora and really kind of talk us through their supporter journey and their results from their email program. You'll probably hear a lot of what Rebecca was saying earlier on. I should sort of say this, what I'm going to talk through works specifically for them. So it's absolutely worth testing your supporter journey, and hopefully you'll see some of the best practices that Rebecca was talking about sort of amplified here, but what worked for them might not necessarily work for everyone for obvious reasons. So there's a lot of text here, so I'll just pull out a few sort of points on this, and I think the slides can be shared at the end anyway. But for them, what worked for them, they had a 6-month automated sort of onboarded process, if you like. One key thing that I really kind of think is useful from their learning is that it used entirely pre-existing content they already had. So think about the content that you actually have as an organisation. A lot of people may think a barrier to sort of building a specific journey is that you don't have the content, or you have to create new content. You'd probably be surprised by what content you already have and actually just repurposing it in a different format. The testing that they did for them was the first kind of financial ask, they did fairly extensive testing, and for them it worked 4 weeks. It was a 4-week wait for their Care2 leads before giving introducing their first financial ask, and they introduced their first regular giving ask after 10 weeks. So this here is their journey. So you can see here, again, kind of echoing some of the principles that Rebecca was talking about early, engagement asks included here, and then they're introducing their soft cash asks and sort of hard cash and regular giving asks at the end there. And you can also see some results there with their opening clicks to the right hand side. So I think this is just really, is my audio okay, Jess? Can people hear me okay?
All good. Yep, all good.
Sorry, I just got a pop up there. So so I'll just keep going. Sorry about that. So I hope that this is useful sort of flowchart for you. And here are just some screenshots that they've shared with us of their examples here. So you can see they've tested a £25 donate ask, works quite well, and actually a much smaller regular giving ask. And then here's some more screenshots there as well. This is their kind of no content ask, and then here we have the soft ask. So here, what I think, so this is great that they're willing to share this. So these are the results that they've shared to date of their Care2 leads from their email supporter journey. The key things to look at this of these kind of numbers is obviously on the left-hand column there you have sort of November 2016. So the thing to bear in mind with supporter with digital lead generation is not just the immediate ROI, it's the medium to long-term ROI, and making sure that you've got that attribution in place. You can also see here they're well on track to getting to a positive ROI after the first year. And they've absolutely kind of exceeded that with their sort of 2018 leads there as well. So I won't read the specific numbers there, but they've been very gracious to allow me to share that information on a webinar. So if there's any sort of questions with that, or I'm happy to kind of introduce you if you want to talk more about, and I'll have any more questions about that. So I'll just leave that there for a moment, just to make sure people have had a chance to look at that slide. But yeah, it's encouraging to see what can be done, and really the purpose of this was to kind of show what can be done with a robust email program. This slide I just wanted to put in. This report actually came across my desk about a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with Blackboard, and they regularly release their benchmark reports. But I often get asked by clients and colleagues, you know, how do I make the case internally for list growth and, you know, digital lead generation? So whatever channel you're using, if it's Care2, Facebook, or other channels, or you're doing your own. But I think this is a very powerful stat that each usable email list on your list is sort of over $14 in annual revenue. So that's if someone's fundraising or giving or sharing or taking action on your list. So I thought I'd just put that up there. As I said, it just came across my desk a couple of weeks ago. But I think, you know, if including this, you know, in your kind of ROI case, it should really be kind of a no-brainer. So just pivoting back a bit to kind of COVID-19 and sort of future proofing and future planning. Certainly what we've all seen here, the ability for organisations to pivot so quickly and find these kind of links to COVID-19 messaging, the way that we're all working has completely changed, our environment has completely changed. So it was really just a note here for us to start thinking about future proofing and how we can kind of keep this up and keep up this kind of rapid response way of working, because I guess it's really kind of putting the question out there about, you know, how forever changed things are now in our own sort of resources. And this, I wanted to kind of sort of semi-close on this point, and it sounds like from seeing the polls earlier that certainly people aren't afraid to fundraise, and I'm sure people aren't here on here, but I have had conversations where people have felt that it's not appropriate to fundraise at the moment. But certainly what we're seeing on Care2, and I'm just going to kind of read you some stats. I can't share this kind of graph with you because it is confidential, but I can share the stats with you. People are very much online and engaged and ready to help. This quote is actually from someone below here, is someone who organises Giving Tuesday, that now is the time to be vulnerable. People want to help and it makes them feel empowered. And just in terms of specific stats for you, so some of our partners, mainly in the US, we have a targeting pixel, so that's where people allow us to drop a pixel onto their website, and we can see how Care2 members are donating. So as I said, this is actually from the US, this isn't from the UK, but we've just got the stats in that 23% of our partners in the US had their best week of 2020 last week in terms of fundraising stats, and then 69% saw an increase in donors from the first half of April versus the last half of March. So really now is a good time to be fundraising, and I think I'm probably preaching to the converted here anyway, but I think it's important to kind of make that point. To that point there, here was just some screenshots, if useful, to show you some email appeals that people are doing in this context, and sharing the work that they're doing. And then just to kind of on a final note here, we also Care2, I mean, our main product is sort of email lead generation and acquisition, but we do also work with some clients where we send emergency Care2 appeals to our list as well on behalf of our clients. This is an example here. It's actually kind of chopped in half the email, but just so you're aware, we don't do it all the time. We have to have a kind of, obviously the strategy needs to be there, but we do run sort of emergency CPM emails as well. And that's it from me. I hope that was useful. Just some links here. I just thought I'd mention now Giving Tuesday. I'm sure people are aware of it. Giving Tuesday is usually in December, but there's actually a specific COVID-19 one on Tuesday, the 5th of May. So do get kind of preparing now for your messaging. And there's some links to some white papers. I'm sure everyone's already aware of the COVID-19 charity preparedness group on Facebook. And there's my details. But I hope that was useful. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Rhiannan. And don't panic if you were desperately trying to write down any of those statistics or note any of those points, because obviously we will be sharing a recording of today's webinar and the slides afterwards, so you will have access to be able to catch up on those. So we've got just over 10 minutes left to take some questions. So if I can ask Rhiannan and Rebecca to make sure your audio is on, and if you'd like to switch on your video as well so the attendees can see you, feel free. We've got a couple of really great questions in the Q&A panel. I'm conscious that we've got a slightly odd situation in that I think some of our attendees can see different bits of the interface. So if you're not able to access the Q&A panel, but you do have audio on your computer, if you are able to raise your hand, I'll try and get to you and make sure that you have the chance to ask your question verbally. So I'll start with Ed Johnson-Williams' question, who had a question for Rebecca about timings on supporter journeys. So why is within the first 24 hours best for the first email? Do you have any other experience of what gap between later emails works best?
Oh, good question. So the reason it's best to send an email as quickly as possible within the first 24 hours is basically because supporters forget that they've signed up to receive your emails. So the rule of thumb is the quicker you can do it, the better. And if you can reference in that email, thanks so much for making a donation, doing X, doing Y, it just means it minimises your unsubscribe rate, which is something you obviously want to keep as low as possible if you're investing in recruiting new supporters. I appreciate that not everyone has the data set up that means they can send emails that quickly, but basically you just want to be aiming for as quickly as possible. On the best latency, like time between emails, unfortunately there's no rule of thumb for that because it just depends on your organisation and your supporters. So the best thing you can do is test and find out. I'd say if you've got a welcome journey, probably best not to leave it more than a week between emails because you want supporters to get used to seeing you in their inbox and engaging with you and building that relationship. But yeah, there is no magic number for that. I'm afraid you're just going to have to test.
Okay, I'm just going to switch on your audio, Ed. Do you want to, if your audio is working, you're able to tell us whether that answered your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, that was great. Thank you very much.
Cool.
That's great. Thanks, Ed. Okay, so moving down to the next question, also for Rebecca. We've got quite a long question from Sam G. So I wondered actually it might be easier to unmute Sam and he can address it himself. Sam, if I unmute you, are we able to hear you?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Sam, would you
Great.
like to explain your question?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you both for all the content. It's really useful. So my question was around the idea of getting a good sense of what a good conversion rate is for an email campaign. So if we were looking at an email campaign where we were ultimately our conversion would be someone making a donation, and we were considering conversion rate to be the percentage of people that opened the email, clicked the link in the email, got taken to the web page and made a donation. I've read and heard various different recommendations for what a good conversion rate would be. And I know that obviously it depends on all kinds of factors, but for an organisation like ourselves that doesn't have many past examples to refer to, I was wondering if it'd be possible or even useful for us to be able to start out saying X% would be a good conversion rate for us.
Could I ask Sam, what is your organisation?
It's Wildlife Trusts.
Cool. An excellent question. So setting benchmarks for success when you don't have past campaigns or past activities to look at can be really tricky. And I think the temptation can be to look at what others are achieving and set those. But as you've already said, the variables are so different. So you could say, okay, well, Liberty got 2.4%, 47%. So let's set that for ourselves. But what you're doing and what Liberty doing are very different, and you're going to be looking at different audiences and different channels. So I think sometimes that can be not the best idea, but also you want to have an idea of, okay, what does success look like for this? I think my advice would be to really focus on setting some strong secondary metrics. So things like your open rates, your conversion rates, your opt-in rates. Focus on setting some for those. So, you know, for example, you want a 60% conversion rate for your landing pages, for example. And then, you know, whatever eventual donation conversion rate you achieve, you know that you've optimized that whole journey. And so what you then achieve can be your benchmark for next time. I think it is okay to set a tentative benchmark to say, okay, we think we might be able to achieve this, but I think it's really important to communicate internally, particularly maybe to senior people who might see it as, okay, we're definitely going to achieve that, just to say, look, this is how we've set this, we're not sure, this is a test, we're going to have to see, and really manage those expectations. Because I think the problem with benchmarks is when they're not hit, people start asking questions and going, well, why didn't that happen? So if you manage that expectation from the start, then you're not going to get into a tricky situation. I hope that answers your question. It is a really tricky one.
Yes, indeed, that was really useful. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for your question, Sam. Okay, we've got another question from Richard, which was also about the Liberty, referring to that Liberty case study. So was that 2.47 conversion rate within the time frame of the welcome journey?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so I've got no more questions in the Q&A panel. Does anyone have any other questions or points they'd like to make? Feel free to either pop them in the Q&A panel or raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can address your question verbally. Any hands up? No, everybody's overwhelmed with input, desperate for a cup of tea. No, final call. Okay, in that case, we'll wind up with a big thanks to our presenters, to Rebecca and Rhiannon, and a big thanks to you as participants. Thank you for your, thank you for joining us.